Welcome back to Kings of Columbus. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis, and looking back at the Michigan game from 2019, Landis, this ain't for fun. We have some rewatch stuff where it's like, hey, remember that like a guy in the stand had a crazy shirt on. This is not that. We are attempting to learn and provide assistance to Ohio State and Ryan Day for 2024. Why are we doing this?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they'll welcome our assistance.
Yeah.
Why are we doing this? I think because there are probably things to kind of grab onto from that game, right? And but also an acknowledgement too that the dynamics are pretty different. I think from the last time Ohio State beat Michigan, and that's part of the thing. Like Ohio State probably needs to adjust to that fact.
So one of the things, though, that did happen, because what we did is we watched the 2019 game. We split up sides of the ball. So we have 5 lessons from each side of the ball. Bill is going to deal with Ohio State's offense versus Michigan's defense. I'm going to deal with Ohio State's defense versus Michigan's offense. And 5 things that we noticed from 2019 that you can apply in certain ways looking ahead to 2024. But I also then looked at some other games. I was looking at stats from the 21, 22, and 23 games. I started to watch the 2022 game again. And like the feeling at the beginning of the 2019 game is not dissimilar, I think, from the feeling of the last 3 Ohio State Michigan games. But what happened in 2019 was like, well, it's close for a while. And then Ohio State just took care of business. Mm-hmm. And then in 21 and 22 and 23, it was close for a while. And then Michigan took care of business. But there were parts of it watching it was like, I don't know. Are there any lessons from anything here? This game feels exactly the same as these other 3 games I've felt the last 3 times Ohio State has lost. Maybe stuff happens sometimes. There was and then I think we found lessons, but I was sort of waiting for it to feel and look completely different from the jump. Like, oh, Michigan sucks. Or like, oh, Ohio State just did a million things better back then. And that was not the vibe that I got.
No, not me neither. And I don't know that I've ever had that vibe in any Ohio State Michigan game that I cover. Because even like go to the year before, the 2018 game, right? That ended up being a runaway for Ohio State, but it didn't start out. Wasn't that game like a 1-possession game at halftime because like Ohio State like fumbled a kickoff and allowed Michigan to score a touchdown right before halftime? Like these games are weird. It's just that for a very long time, Ohio State was the team that found the way to win and pull away. And lately, obviously, that's not been the case.
But it also made me realize, like, if it's ingrained, I think maybe in us as reporters, but especially in fans, like an Ohio State Michigan game starts, and it's like, it'll be fine. Like Ohio State will be fine. It's close now. It'll be fine. It'll be because it like in 2019, that's what it was, and it had been, as you just said, it had been that way so many times before. So for 3 straight years to be like, okay, and then like, oh my God, times 3. Yeah. It's really quite a deal. It's quite a deal, isn't it?
It is quite a deal. It's very strange. Yeah.
And there's also a part of me, like in rewatching some of like the last 3 losses, I was like, I cannot believe Ohio State lost these games.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially, I think the last 2 years. I mean, not so. 21 was like a little bit of a steamrolling, I think, but 22 and 23 were not that. Those games were there for the taking.
Because I will say, like in 2019, Michigan scored first, the game that we're going to talk about. In 2021, Michigan scored first. In 2022, Ohio State scored first. And in 2023, Michigan scored first. So part of this is like, hey, well, you got to do this. It starts like, well, they did that. Or it's like, oh, well, don't do this. Well, they did that too. Like there are things that I thought maybe initially when I was watching 2019, I was like, oh, this will be a lesson. And it was like, no, Ohio State did that. And they still didn't win the last 3 times. So it was an interesting experience. And I have some thoughts about, as I'm sure you do, just about like talent level and what Michigan has now and had then and what Ohio State had then and has now. So let's get down to it. We'll start on your side of the ball, Bill Landis, with these are Philly Billy's 5 lessons that the Ohio State Buckeyes can take into the 2024 game from the 2019 game, the last time the Buckeyes beat the Wolverines. What's number 1?
Yeah, the number 1 is just the changing dynamics for Michigan's defense. I think both in talent on the field and also kind of who's calling things right there. We'll start with the who's calling things, I suppose. Like there was no doubt that Ryan Day had Down Brown's number, the former defensive coordinator at Michigan. And Don Brown had a lot of strengths, but those strengths sometimes also became his weaknesses. And Ryan Day knew how to exploit them tremendously. Like that was part of the reason I think why Ryan Day got the head coaching job is because of how well he exploited them the year before in 2018 when they just crossing routed Michigan's defense to death. And like that was evident still in the 2019 game. Like Michigan made some adjustments. There were some key moments where it was kind of hard to believe that Don Brown decided he was going to send the house at Ohio State, and he did. And then drives were extended and touchdowns were scored. And Ryan Day still very much had the upper hand in that matchup, and it's just not the same now. To Mike McDonald and then Jesse Minter, we'll see now with those two guys gone, whether or not Wink Martindale will continue that. But it's been much more of an even playing field the last 3 years, and in fact, I think fairly slanted in Michigan's direction, and obviously there's a big asterisk that comes with that, I suppose. But the defense, not I suppose there is that big asterisk that comes with that. But I don't think there's anyone or any question that Mike McDonald and Jesse Minter have brought more to the table defensively, more complexity for Ohio State to deal with, just from a schematic standpoint, than Don Brown had. So that was one thing, and then the other is just like the pure talent level on the field. This to me was like. It wasn't the beginning necessarily of Michigan's uptick, because like they had talented defenses before, right? It is Michigan. I think that 2016 defense was kind of loaded. But this group in 2019 had some future stars, but guys that weren't quite that yet. Still had a decent number of guys who were drafted. But I grabbed like this defense in 2019, the guys who started and either played 20 snaps. And there were 3 eventual first-round picks. It was Kwity Paye, who was drafted 2 years after this game, Aiden Hutchinson and Daxton Hill, who were drafted 3 years after this game. So those are the young guys. And the rest are like mid to late round picks. Like there's just not a whole lot of star-level talent on this defense. And then you fast forward a couple of years to the 22 Michigan defense, for instance. A bunch of early draft picks on that defense. There were... Let's see, a first-round pick, a second-round pick, a third-round pick, a second-round pick, a second-round pick, and that doesn't include Will Johnson, who's going to be a first-round pick, Mason Graham, who's going to be a first-round pick, right? There's just a depth of talent on Michigan's defense that was starting to kind of rise to the top, I think, with this year, but wasn't quite there. And probably wasn't quite there in 2020 either, but Ohio State didn't have to contend with it, or Michigan didn't have to contend with Ohio State, probably, to put it more correctly. But then in 21, 22, 23, it has just been a very talented defense. And I think that this game was a reminder of that. It's just a different kind of animal that Ohio State is dealing with talent-wise.
And I don't know, like it's maybe a lesson for fans, right? Again, it's just like the idea of there's no reason to underestimate how good Michigan is. It doesn't serve anything. Mm-hmm. And that, in 2016, when it felt like Michigan was going to come in and was it 16? Like Chase Winovich used to be a guy that was like, hey, Michigan has Chase Winovich. And it's like, I don't even think Chase Winovich would be in the 2 deep anymore at Michigan, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, and so, yeah, they started recruiting better, not to Ohio State's level, but better than they were before. And they developed better. And the schematic thing absolutely can't be underestimated. So, like, they just got much better on defense in scheme and personnel, which is 2 of the 3 things that matter. So the lesson is you got to deal with it now, but you can't make the assumed edge that an Ohio State offense had on Michigan. And I think probably people still probably thought Ohio State had that going into 2021. You just can't think that way anymore. Now, the one thing is, to your point, so Wink Martindale, the Michigan defensive coordinator now, is like the guy who invented the defense that Jesse Minter and Mike McDonald ran at Michigan the last 3 years. But I'd rather have Mike McDonald or Jesse Minter running it right now, right? They're on the way up, and Wink Martindale is on the back end of his career. Is it possible that schematically Michigan's defense will be the worst it's been since 2019 because Wink Martindale just probably won't be quite as sharp as Mike McDonald and Jesse Minter were the last 3 years?
I think it's very possible. Yeah. If I'm a Michigan fan, I'm worried about that a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. So that's a good thing for Ohio State that, like, hey, it's been good, but maybe it'll take a step back there. So, okay. But you have to note this, you have to be realistic, and you have to tip the cap a little bit of like, hey, the program that Ohio State dominated for 2 decades, guess what? They got better. And this is probably where it sticks out the most. All right, what's number 2?
Number 2 is I guess like an appreciation almost for like an offensive line that is built from the inside out. This Ohio State offensive line in 2019 was collectively very good. Your tackles were Thayer Munford and Brandon Bowen. And then your interior was Josh Myers at center, Wyatt Davis at right guard, and Jonah Jackson at left guard. And those guys were awesome. They were so good in the middle of that offensive line. I wrote a story about it at the Fiesta Bowl that year about like, yeah, Justin Fields is great. J.K. Dobbins is an absolute dog. Like the engine of this team, at least offensively, is these 3 guys in the middle of the offensive line with their like tenacity, their athleticism, the way they just kind of got things going in the run game, but also, good pass protectors too. And I just found it interesting kind of like juxtaposed to basically every season since then, where there's maybe, I guess not so much the following year, but after 2020, there's always kind of been like a thing with the offensive line generally, but I think more specifically kind of with the middle, right? There was the messing around with the 4 tackles thing and not necessarily having 2 guards to play and figuring out the best way to do that. There was Carson Hinsman having to play obviously way too early at center. And now we're going into this year where we don't know who the right guard is, at the beginning of June. And I guess I can't say definitively that it is like better to build your offensive line from the inside out rather than start with really good tackles and work from there. That either one is probably fine. But I think Ohio State has struggled to be as solid as it was in the middle of the offensive line kind of since this year. And it was very apparent in this game just how much those 3 guys kind of owned the line of scrimmage. Like in the first quarter of the game, Joel Klatt is talking about Michigan's undersized defensive tackles and whether or not they're up to the task of dealing with Ohio State's physicality in the middle of the offensive line. And like, when is the last time that someone said that about us? That probably is the last time that someone said that about Ohio State.
And how did it happen? 5-star Wyatt Davis, 5-star Josh Myers. And when we talk about, hey, Ohio State should go in the portal and get an offensive lineman, Jonah Jackson is what that looks like. Yeah. Like if Justin Fields was unbelievable, Jonah Jackson is the perfect. That is how transferring should work. And that guy is in the NFL getting paid and taking names, man. Mm-hmm. Like he was only here for a year, but I don't know. Like if we're gonna do a list of like the most underrated Buckeyes, it's like the one year guy who played at Rutgers before he got here. But he probably, like, I don't know that anybody while he was here understood how awesome he was. But it's like no coincidence. It's a 5-star transfer. That's however you grade it. That's a great transfer. And 2 huge recruits. And that's not what they have. That's not what they have in the interior of the offensive line since then.
No, it's, I mean, and Jonah Jackson, like I don't have probably enough knowledge of Rutgers roster prior to 2019 to say this definitively, but I'll do it anyway. Probably the best player in a really bad team, right? But the best player in a really bad team that is a Power 5 team, nonetheless, right? He's not Louisiana Monroe's struggling tackle, right? Or a P5 tackle like Josh Simmons ones that you're just like, you're really hoping that your projection's right. And like, maybe it will be, like the returns on that were good, but there is something more reliable, I think, about finding a player the caliber of Jonah Jackson. And when Ohio State has had to mine the portal the last few years to find an offensive lineman, they've not really come close to finding that kind of reliability from the jump.
Why? Why were those 3 of the interior offensive linemen then, and it hasn't looked like that since? Where is the, I don't want to say failure. Where's the misstep? Why is it not up to that level?
Well, I think like Donovan Jackson like didn't hit early quite the same way that like Wyatt Davis and Josh Myers did. Luke Whippler leaving a year earlier than he should have, I think really, really hurt them. And then probably the transfer thing too. Like, and I guess part of it is like recruiting missteps, but if you're going to say that, you also have to, I guess, give Greg Studrawa a tip of the cap too for like getting Wyatt Davis and Josh Myers here, right? Even though like Josh Myers is from Ohio and you and I probably could have recruited him here. And I don't know if Wyatt Davis picked Ohio State necessarily because of Greg Studrawa, but he was the position coach. So there was a couple of nice pieces of recruiting, but it wasn't consistent enough over the years.
Yeah. Wyatt Davis is in the recruiting book. Urban Meyer took him on a golf cart tour when he got to campus.
Yeah.
So like golf cart tours, just in general. People love golf carts. You get relaxed. It's like a car, but it's not like a car. It's kind of like riding around on a lawnmower. It just makes you feel happy. So do that. Do that more. All right. What's number 3?
Number 3, I think, kind of goes hand in hand with what we just talked about, and that is run the damn ball.
There are people. Someone just drove into a telephone pole. People are falling off the treadmills in the gym. Are you okay, Chad? Are you okay? Oh, it's glee. It's glee.
Yeah. It's what this game is, man. Like, it's what it is. You have to do it.
So there's like a part of it that's like, I want Ohio State to throw 75 times a game to beat everybody. And I hate the toughness conversation. But when Bill Landis says, run the damn ball, I listen. So can all the things be true that like Ohio State needs to throw the win? And like, it's not about being tough, but also run the damn ball. Like, can we have a lot of things that maybe are true to varying degrees, but then the last 4 words of the sentence are run the damn ball?
Yeah, I think so. It's not like, I mean, it is. It's the balance conversation is not the most exciting conversation in the world. I understand that. That's basically what this is, right? Like Ohio State led Power 5 in rushing in 2019. Justin Fields still threw for 3,000 yards. Was a Heisman Trophy candidate, right? There is a way to be both, and like we've seen Ohio State be both, and they need, I think, to get back to that kind of balance. It did get away from them a little bit over the last couple of years, but I kind of think they're going to be that this year, or something closer to that this year. But this game was the last in a streak of 8 straight games where Ohio State ran the ball for at least 200 yards against Michigan. I think a lot of people are aware of the stat. The team that has led the rushing battle in this game has won the last 21 times since 2002. Every game, the winner is the team that has rushed for the most yards. And obviously that was Ohio State for a long time. And the last 3 games, they just have not run the ball all that well. And like Michigan didn't run it well last year either, but they ran it slightly better. Obviously the 2 years before that, Michigan did whatever it wanted to do running the ball, and Ohio State struggled. And like, if you go back through the game logs of some of these games, there are individual games during that 8-game streak where Ohio State had more rushing yards than it has had the last 3 years combined. It's just like really gotten away from them. And I'm not saying they need to turn into a triple option offense, but their run game has become, I think, wholly unreliable over the last 3 years. And not just in the Michigan game. It just seems like maybe bite them the most in the Michigan game. And I think that needs to change. Like, and this was a team that ran it to perfection almost, with J.K. Dobbins and Justin Fields on that offensive line. And like, I understand that the pieces matter, but maybe Ohio State needs to be a little bit more intentional about the pieces it puts together when it comes to making sure that they can run the ball effectively.
So I want to ask this question without like putting blame on a player, because it's the school that brings players in, and there are a bunch of different players who have different strengths, and everybody on the Ohio State roster is good at something. J.K. Dobbins is like a pit bull crossed with a bowling ball, right? Like J.K. Dobbins will get after you, right? Is that like he's supremely talented, but he'll put his head down and run you over. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it coincidental, or perhaps there's a correlation here that the lead Ohio State running back of the last 3 seasons, who hasn't always been healthy, but like that's not his style, that TreVeyon Henderson is not necessarily a run you over, maul you bowling ball kind of guy. He's the lightning in a thunder and lightning. And he hasn't even been healthy sometimes at the end of these games. They had Chip Traynor running the ball a couple years ago. So like that's not his fault. But and it's not about Trey, because Trey's Trey. Trey's sitting there in Virginia doing his thing. You decide if you want to bring him in and make him your lead back or not. Has Ohio State missed their lead in the Michigan game? Has Ohio State missed their lead back, their most talented back? Because Mayan Williams will run you over and Chip Traynor will run you over, but that's not J.K. Dobbins, and that's not Eddie George, and that's not Carlos Hyde, and that's not the history of running backs who will run you over. Zeke. Has that shown up in the Michigan game in a way that would make a difference and maybe make you say, Ohio State should not recruit a guy like that with that skill set to be their lead running back anymore.
Yeah, maybe. I think it is worth pointing out, as you said, that I think probably at the end of Trey's freshman year, he was not 100%. The end of his sophomore year, he didn't even play in that game. And then last year, last year, it kind of felt like, okay, here we go. Like Travion's healthy going into the Michigan game. This might kind of be his moment. And it wasn't. And it's not to say like that he like showed up like unready to play. Like I think he did. It just didn't quite hit for him the way maybe I certainly thought it potentially could have. But he still had some nice moments in the game. They had that one drive where they just like ran him off the field and scored a touchdown. And Trey ran incredibly well on that drive. But yeah, I think there probably is something to Travion being, for lack of a better descriptor, like the prototypical like third down back kind of guy. He's something more than that. But
yeah,
in terms of like physical profile and skill set, there's maybe a little more finesse to his game than there is power. And maybe if you're going to give a guy the ball 25, 30 times in this game, you want a little more power.
So how does Quinshon Judkins fit into this then?
Really well, I think, which I think in turn is like excellent for Travion. Again, that's why I'm so high on the potential of their rushing attack this year, because I kind of think they have finally hit on the kind of balance they need. And even like if they just had Quinshon Judkins, that'd be great. I think Quinshon Judkins is one of the top 5 running backs in the sport, but to pair him with Travion, who I think complements him incredibly well, and just like throw that out there every week at teams and like maybe use them together and find that balance of power and speed and agility within your run game. I just think the potential is off the charts for what they could do. So maybe the Michigan game ends up being a game where like Quinshon Judkins is the guy who's getting it 25 times. Maybe Travion gets it more like 12 times, but I still think both of them can certainly coexist.
So I get aggravated when people seem to want Ohio State to run the ball like Michigan in the Ohio State-Michigan game. I don't think that's it. But Ohio State should run the ball like Ohio State. Like to your point here of like to try to emulate, Michigan style of play. It's not about Michigan style of play, but it's about Ohio State making sure that it retains a physical component that is probably more important than this game than in any other game during the year. And for instance, like now I am comparing it to Michigan. TreVeyon Henderson, I think is fair to say, is more talented than Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins. Is that?
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. But is it possible that Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum were more built for the Ohio State Michigan game? And I'm not trying to pile on TreVeyon. It's a point about the choices Ohio State makes and how it builds its roster and what type of players it goes after. But you know what I'm saying here, right?
Yeah, I do. But I don't. I might hesitate to agree with that, only because part of me wonders like if TreVeyon played in Michigan's offense, would he look like those guys? Right? Like I think there is a trickle down effect of like head coach and offensive line and whoever your OC is and play caller, and like what you want to be and what you want to hang your hat on. That sort of impacts the personality of your running back, I guess, a little bit. So, like if Ohio State is not a downhill physical rushing team and is very much a pass first team, but then the head coach like sort of disingenuously talks about like being physical, I think that might tend to bring out the worst in your running back. Whereas if it's like your way of doing business, I think the running back is probably in a better position to be successful.
Yeah, you're right. I don't want to be unfair, but I think there's a point in there somewhere, half a point, right? At the very least. TreVeyon's listed at 208. J.K. Dobbins was listed at like 218. So, it's just like you are who you are. It's not like J.K. Dobbins was 230 and TreVeyon Henderson's 165.
Yeah.
Right? But
yeah.
It's a little more stylistic. All right. What's number 4?
Number 4 is Justin Fields and like the idea of having a more of a gamer at quarterback. And I don't think that either of CJ Stroud's losses to Michigan were because CJ played poorly. And like statistically, he had very good games. But this is just the kind of game where you need your quarterback to do a little something, like make a play, maybe even be a little risky. And like Justin Fields did that in this game. For one, like Justin Fields came into this game with a bad knee because he got injured at the end of the Penn State game the week before. Kind of played through it, still ran the ball, still escaping the pocket. He had one play where he like baited a guy to come try to tackle him, and then he like threw a chest pass to Jeremy Ruckert on the sideline. It was just like a pure schoolyard kind of play. Like, I think you need to do some of that stuff. I think we saw JJ McCarthy do a little bit of that the last couple of years for Michigan. And like CJ Stroud is great, but I think like the frustrations with him from the Michigan game are somewhat warranted, where you're just like, you want a guy of that caliber to do a little something extra in those games. And again, like it's not his fault they lost those games. That's not what I'm saying, but I do think you need that element at that position in any big game, right? We saw CJ do it in the Peach Bowl, and that was awesome to see. But Justin Fields like kind of lived that life every week. It's just kind of like the quarterback that he was, and I think you need that element to your offense when you're trying to win this rivalry consistently.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. I was gonna the CJ against Georgia is like, that's right. Well, it's like, where was that? It was like, well, it was kind of always there, or whatever. Again, I mean,
yeah.
But yeah, I think everybody watching this knows what you mean by this. And again, it is not. And this is, see, now we're creeping. We're creeping towards toughness. We're like, we're run the damn ball and the quarterback be a gamer. And like Ryan Day's like, yes. But yet it can't be disingenuous. It can't be at the expense of what you can't build your team one way and then ask them to play another way.
100%.
Right. Yeah. You have to this has to be a foundational principle. And so maybe Quinshon Judkins, maybe Chip Kelly, maybe like these are foundational things that will lead you toward this. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Maybe Will Howard's a gamer.
I think Will Howard is a little bit of a gamer. Like, not in the same way that he's not the same athlete as Justin Fields, not even close, but I think he's got a little bit of I'll let this 300-pound guy run me over if it means that I can get this playoff kind of thing to him. Yeah. So, and it's football, right? It's a violent sport. Like sometimes that's what it calls for. And I think Will Howard might be about that.
So if they got a slightly more gamery quarterback, a slightly more physical running back, and an offensive coordinator who wants to run the ball, like they're checking some Bill Landis boxes here for this game. Yes.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. That's why I'm pretty excited. Is probably not the right word. But I don't know. Very intrigued, I guess, by what the kind of personality that this offense is going to take on, because I do feel like it could look or feel quite different than it has felt the last few years.
And that's different than talking about toughness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's different than anybody acting like Ohio State should play like Michigan plays when Ohio State has better skill guys. But there's something in here. All right, what's number 5?
The last one for me was I just don't know that Michigan is kind of the same team it was in this 2019 game when it comes to keeping its emotions in check. And by that, I mean, they're kind of much better at it now than they appeared to be. Not even just in this game in 2019, but I think like leading up to like the revenge tour stuff, like totally backfired on them. And I thought in this 2019 game, Michigan was rather undisciplined. There were a couple of boneheaded decisions, but I'll just stick to like the defensive side. There was like a punt on 4th and 4 where Michigan jumped off sides, like I guess out of eagerness to block a punt. They give Ohio State a first down, and Ohio State ends the drive with a touchdown. There was
Justin
a play.
Fields threw like a 50-yard pass to Garrett Wilson, like on the next play.
On the very next play, and then J.K. Dobbins scored on the play after that. And then later in the game, I think it was on the first drive of the third quarter, where like the game's not quite out of hand yet, but it's sort of getting there. And Ohio State's in like third, or is going to be in 3rd and long, with Michigan having the opportunity to get them off the field with only a field goal, or maybe even a missed field goal. And Cam McGrone just like decks Justin Fields is well out of bounds. It's a personal foul. There's actually 2 penalties on the play because there was also defensive holding. And that extends a drive that ends in a touchdown. So like Michigan didn't have a plethora of penalties in this game. There were only 5, but there were 5 in this one game for Michigan. And in the last 3 games, they only have 9. So like they have cut down on that a little bit. I think that is a major component of this, right? Is the emotional aspect and whether or not that sort of takes you out of your fundamentals. And I think Ohio State, by and large, has done a much better job of that over the last probably 15 years of this rivalry. But I think the last couple of years that's sort of maybe evened out. I don't know that I would say that Michigan has the edge there, but I do think that Michigan has erased some of those bad habits that led to these kind of backbreaking penalties.
So I think, right, the Sean Crable hit on Troy Smith out of bounds, right? Like you can find these things where like the boneheaded play that you can't make can really swing a game. This was the game where they untied J.K. Dobbins' shoe and got a
penalty. I had that in my notes. I forgot to mention that too. Yeah, Carlo Kemp and Aiden Hutchinson tried to steal J.K. Dobbins' shoe.
Whereas if you think about the last 3 years, when you think boneheaded play, last 3 years of the Ohio State-Michigan game, what's number one on the list?
G. Scott headbutting whoever he headbutted. Yeah.
Right? I mean, like that's the kind of thing. So the lesson here is there was a time when Ohio State did have better talent and was doing things, but Michigan got in its own head, and Ohio State was beating Michigan, and Michigan was also beating itself at that point, and that's over.
Yeah.
So at the very least, Ohio State cannot assume that Michigan will beat itself, but then it would also be helpful if Ohio State would also stop beating itself. So you can't control whether the other team does boneheaded things. Just make sure you don't do them yourself.
Yeah.
And like that's on the list.
That is on the list. Yeah. And I think like last year, I believe Ohio State only had one penalty in the Michigan game. But the 2 years prior to that, I think they had 19 combined. In 2021 and 2022, they had 19 penalties. So, like, that's too many in this game.
And so this is progress. Like, they're making progress on this. But I think there would have been a time, if you're an Ohio State fan watching this game, you could have said to yourself, because you hate them. But also, there would have been realistic. You would have said, they'll do something stupid.
Yeah.
And you can't say that anymore. So, whatever happened, however it happened, Michigan stopped beating itself, which opened the possibility of Michigan beating Ohio State. So now for back to ground zero, where nobody's going to beat themselves. Now let's play ball. So, and Ohio State should feel fine on the let's play ball framework of things.
Yeah.
But just don't wait for Michigan to hand you something, because it's certainly less likely to happen than it was in 2019. Okay. Overall, did you have like your final overall? The one thing that I took away, and this is your side of the ball, I thought this was a great example of the run the ball, take a deep shot. Fields hit a couple deep shots here, and they have gotten away from that. Like this was kind of like how Ryan Day wanted to play: run the ball, deep shot, run the ball, play action. And right, I mean, especially at the end of CJ Stroud, I was like, we can't throw deep anymore. They took that away, and it's like, why did they take that away? It was because nobody respects you running the ball. Like there's also just like a feel to the game. That there was just a vibe to it, and Ohio State was pretty relentless offensively, but that's kind of how they were relentless. Like they'll run you over, and the minute you let up, they hit you over the top.
I think, but I actually think that goes back to the offensive line. I just think there is like tremendous comfort and confidence in knowing that you will own the line of scrimmage, and Ohio State, and like just about every game that year did, and especially in this game.
So you'd love. I think Ohio State would just love to get back to that feel. That's Ryan Day at his best. As much as he's a check it around guy, run the ball, hit him over the top.
Yeah,
that's his dreamland.
I think that is exactly where he would like to live. Yeah,
and he hasn't lived there for a while. Have they lived there? Do they live there anymore? They moved.
They don't live there. They have not lived there the last 3 years, but they helped. They helped mask it for two of them because the guy doing the throw-in was about the best we've ever seen do it. So that helps too.
It was quite a trick. What an odd thing. Man, that era. That we're just going to look back. And it's like, remember, hey, you guys all know how like CJ Stroud's the best player in NFL history? Yeah. Remember how like he just couldn't beat Michigan? It was kind of like, he's not the guy to do this, but he was the guy to win 5 Super Bowls. Remember that? That was weird.
Yeah.
Just weird. All right. That's the offensive side of the ball for Ohio State. When we come back, we'll have some lessons from the Ohio State defensive side of the ball next on Kings of Columbus. Back on Kings of Columbus. You can drop us a review on Apple Podcasts. You can give us a thumb or just leave a comment in here on YouTube. We certainly appreciate you guys making us part of your Ohio State fandom and part of your week. If you want to be a tech subscriber, right, there's also stuff going on this summer. You know, we're not that far away from Big Ten Media Days at the end of July, and then camp will be here before you know it. 614-662-4509 is how you sign up for the text. You get a link back to sign up. It's a 2-week free trial, and it's $6 a month after that. So, you know, they're going to be pretty good, always pretty interesting. And we'd love to have you on board with the text where we send you facts and expertise and info right into your phone. All right. Defensive side of the ball, Michigan offense versus Ohio State defense. Number one. What did I have? I can't. What did I go? Oh, yeah. They were dumb. So they had like a drive at the end of the first half where they got in the red zone and they like third down and Shea Patterson just dropped the snap on third down. It was like, I don't know, maybe it would have been a touchdown and you would have scored there, but you just dropped the snap. So that hurt. And then they had another screwy thing where it led to a field goal. And they had another thing where they punted them down and they should have pinned Ohio State at the 1 and they just flubbed downing the ball at the 1 yard line. In addition to all the other stuff you did, they just were dumb. They just were like just mistake after mistake. That was like, okay, they don't do that anymore. But it was like, you ended with that. And I just wanted to reinforce that once upon a time, brother, like Michigan was not ready to win this game. Oh, no, the other thing was, in the first half, on 3rd and about 6, Shea Patterson dropped the snap as a quarterback, which led to a field goal. And then Donovan Peoples-Jones dropped the touchdown in the back of the end zone, where he did get hit by Jordan Fuller and Jeff Okuda, but he had the ball in his hands and he dropped it. And they actually initially on the broadcast, they thought it was a touchdown, then it wasn't. And so that's like 10 points off the board that could have made this like basically a tie game at halftime, and Michigan just threw them away because they were incapable of like making plays when it mattered.
There was another one. I think it was in the second half when like a quasi felt like Michigan might get back into the game, and it was like a 3rd and long pass to Tariq Black, and like if he would have just turned one way and put the ball out, they would have got the first down, but he just like moseyed out of bounds, and then Michigan had to try to convert like a 4th and 1, and Ohio State's like, nope, you're not going to do that.
Yeah,
like just like situational awareness was lacking, I think, with Michigan back then.
But it's just one of those things where you look back and wonder, it's like, hey, what was one of the big Ohio State defensive plays of the game? I don't know. When the Michigan quarterback dropped the snap, and he didn't just like they lost the ball. It was a fumble. It was a turnover.
Yep.
That helped. Oh, what happened there? What was the great Kerry Cones? No, there was nothing. It was just incompetence. Why did you drop the ball? Like, it's just, so again, just a reminder.
Joel Klatt tried to blame it on the wind, which I was like, oh, the wind blew the snap. I was like, I don't think that's how that works.
But you just like there was an assumption that stuff would happen, and you can't assume it anymore. So if Michigan is not going to give Ohio State this game anymore, and in 2019 they did, in several key moments they gave them the game, and then Ohio State gladly took it, but Michigan put it up on a platter. All right, number 2. This is where we're starting to dance in. Does Doug say crazy stuff on a show? So this was the era where Ohio State played 3 linebackers and 1 deep safety. So Pete Werner, Tuff Borland, and Malik Harrison were on the field together most of this game. Sometimes Baron Browning was in instead of Tuff Borland. I thought early on, especially, Malik Harrison was getting after it. And those linebackers were downhill. They were in gaps. They were attacking the run game. Michigan did not run the ball very well in this game, 3.5 yards per carry. And they just had him in a couple situations. Now, Shea Patterson still made some throws on 3rd down. They were terrible on 3rd down. We'll get that in a minute. But I just thought it wasn't. Now, listen, Chase Young's in this game. Chase Young didn't dominate this game. I thought the Ohio State linebackers stopped the run game. And they had 7 or 8 guys in the box a lot. Crazy time. They don't play 3 linebackers anymore. They have 2 deep safeties now. When I was watching back, right, you'll find Lathan Ransom's creeping up and like kind of being like a safety in the box. They've moved back. Like everyone hated the single high safety. They've moved back to this 2 deep safety look. And since they've moved back to that 2 deep safety look with Jim Knowles, they haven't beaten Michigan. Should they play 3 linebackers every down against Michigan and let linebackers go make plays? Because all I want in life is another Ryan Shazier. I thought Malik Harrison in the first half of the 2019 game looked like Ryan Shazier. And then I looked at the stats. He only had like 2.5 tackles, but I just thought he was getting after it and making running backs like stutter step in the hole, or they'd try to get wide and somebody would be there. I thought Warner and Harrison were both active and downhill. And it feels like that's not the way the Ohio State linebackers play in this defensive scheme. Maybe it's personnel, maybe it's scheme, but I don't know for this game. Tell me I'm wrong. What am I doing here? Why am I doing things? I don't know.
No, I don't know that you're wrong. I mean, I certainly have read a lot of questions from people, and like have been asked a lot of questions from people about like whether or not this defensive structure is the correct one to beat a team that's built the way that Michigan is. I think those are probably fair questions. The thing about it is like a lot of teams don't play with 3 linebackers anymore. Michigan doesn't play with 3 linebackers anymore. And their defense is just fine, but Michigan's also not playing itself, right? So if Michigan was playing itself, maybe it would play a little bit differently. So I don't think you're off base with like a Michigan specific defensive game plan or defensive structure. And we have seen Ohio State try to do that, but I guess it's fair to question like whether or not they do it enough throughout the course of the season to be as good as they need to be at it when the time comes, right? Like they don't major in it, and I guess that's fine, but are you proficient enough in it when that game rolls around to be the kind of defense you need to be to win the game? And I think like I mean I thought they did a good job last year, so I don't, and I think Jim Knowles' defense has done a fine job stopping the run by playing a 4-2-5. Like even in the Big 12 where there were some good big physical teams like to run the ball a lot, like it was an effective defense. So it's not to say that one can't work and 3 linebackers is the way to go. Absolutely. But again, maybe it's something super specific to this game, like sort of like my hope that they run the ball better. I don't know that Ohio State has to do that every game, but it needs to show up with an ability to do it in this game. And maybe that's the same thing with the linebackers.
Base defense of Cody Simon at middle linebacker, flanked by Sonny Styles and CJ Hicks with Caleb Downs as the single deep safety.
Yeah.
Heard worse ideas. I don't know. I don't want to be crazy, but it just, I felt like you just felt it. And even then in watching some of like the 22 game, like Lathan Ransom would come down in the box, but he's still, I mean, he's a safety coming up into the box. He's not as active up at the line of scrimmage, and he's catching running backs 5 yards down the field, where it felt like the linebackers were being more proactive in this. And again, Michigan moved the ball in this game. Michigan scored 27, and it probably should have had 35 or 40. They didn't give the ball away a couple times, like didn't do stupid stuff. So
they threw the ball really well against an Ohio State defense that was number 1 in the country in pass defense that year.
Yeah. So I have some throwing stuff in a minute, but I don't know if there's actually anything to be done here, but it looked right to me.
Yeah, but I think that's the trade-off too, right? It's like play your 3 linebackers and play them downhill against the run, but then like Michigan, which had an inept passing offense the entire year, is going to find ways to throw the ball even against a team that was number 1 in the country in passing defense efficiency. Yeah,
they were getting linebackers in mismatches a lot during the course of that game. So
and they were doing stuff with motion too. Like a part of the pitfalls, I think, of the single high safety is like when you can get Damon Arnett playing free safety instead of Jordan Fuller, and that's how the Michigan got that one ball down the seam. I think they scored a touchdown on, right?
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't think it's completely coincidental that like they've gone to this shift, and then when you think about this matchup, Michigan's won 3 straight against a defense that isn't as in its scheme selling out to stop the run. I don't know. Not a lesson, just an observation.
Yeah.
Don't change. It's all fine. Just an observation. All right. What's number 3? What did I say for number 3? I can't remember. Oh, every offensive line starter for Michigan in this game got drafted. So, and like Chase Young, late when Michigan got desperate, Chase Young got after it for a bit. But like for the first half, when it was still a game, like Michigan was doing whatever it wanted to do. It didn't matter that Chase Young was the best defensive player in college football. Jalen Mayfield, who went on to be a 3rd-round pick, was kind of handling him at tackle. John Runyon at tackle went on to be a pick. So John Runyon, their left tackle, was a 6th. They had 4 senior starters on this offensive line. Cesar Ruiz was a 1st-round pick, their center after this. It's like you and I love Olu Oluwatimi, man. They always have great centers at Michigan. Their guards were a 4th-round pick and a 6th-round pick the season after this game. John Runyon, the left tackle, was a 6th-round pick, and then Jalen Mayfield, the right tackle, was a 3rd-round pick the following year. Mm-hmm. So, like, if you think, oh, man, Michigan on the offensive line, what are you going to do? That, like, they were good then, and Ohio State beat them. So, like, that's my lesson of this, of, like, don't let Michigan's strength on the offensive line be an excuse, because they were good on the offensive line in 2019, and Ohio State still took care of business. That's what I'm trying to say here.
No, I think that's right. It's like an accepted reality, I guess, of who Michigan is now, and probably will continue to be, right? With Sherrone Moore there isn't like an offensive line guy, right? I think that is a marker of a Jim Harbaugh program, but I expect that to continue with Sherrone Moore there.
It would be like Michigan saying, oh, well, we lose to Ohio State because they have great receivers. It's like, that's not ever going to change. Find a way to beat Ohio State despite the fact that Ohio State has great receivers. Find a way to beat Michigan despite the fact that Michigan has a experienced, talented offensive line that they're just going to put draft picks out there. Their offensive line is going to be better than Ohio State's offensive line. They're not, right? This year, it's better than Ohio State's offensive line. Ohio State's not playing 5 draft picks on their offensive line this year. Right. So I don't know exactly what Michigan's going to do there. Right there. There's a lot of readjustments, but assume it's good.
Starters. Yeah.
Assume it's good and beat them anyway, is my advice.
Yeah.
Number 4. So they wound up 2 of 13 on 3rd down. And a lot of this was because they got behind and they had to throw. Now, so my advice is make Michigan play from behind and throw. This thing of it's Ohio State in 2021 had a 10-7 lead, and that was it. Never led again. In 2022, Ohio State was up 7-0, 7-3, up 10-3, up 13-10, up 20-17 right before the half, and then fell behind in the second half, and that was it. 2023, Ohio State never led.
Mm-hmm.
So, as well as a little incongruous, as well as Michigan did throw it in this game, and I actually thought Shea Patterson walked so J.J. McCarthy could run.
Yeah.
Because Shea Patterson was, like, by some estimates, the number 1 quarterback recruit in the country when he went to Ole Miss, when he transferred back to Michigan. You thought I think what you maybe thought Shea Patterson could be is what J.J. McCarthy actually turned out to be. But also J.J. McCarthy was in a much more comfortable situation the last 2 years. Shea Patterson was down 28-16 at the half and had to throw. He was down 35-16. He was down 42-16. Then they came back a little bit, and he did make some good throws. But I think if Ohio State had been able to get a lead on J.J. McCarthy, I think they might have made him look like Shea Patterson looked, which is like make some throws a couple times, but also this is too much to ask. And so last year, again, the craziest stat of last year is that Michigan was 3 of 12 on 3rd down and beat Ohio State anyway. But they were very good on 3rd down in 21 and 22. They were terrible on 3rd down in 19. They were 2 of 13. And then, like, Ohio State didn't get a sack until the second half, but that's when, like, Jonathan Cooper and Chase Young started pinning their ears back and getting after the quarterback because they knew they were going to throw.
Right.
So, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, what's your strategy for the game? It's like, be ahead. It's like, that's not a strategy. That's a result, right? That's an outcome. That's not a how to get ahead. But, like, this idea is just a reminder that I think Michigan behind is a very different animal than Michigan ahead. And Ohio State has not been able to maintain any kind of lead or get Michigan uncomfortable the last 3 years.
Yeah, I think that's right. I actually flirted with the idea of making like a similar idea one of my lessons, because Joel Klatt made mention of it during the broadcast of this game about how for really the first probably 4 years of Ohio State's or Ryan Day's tenure at Ohio State, like they would score almost like a basketball team. Like they would just go on these crazy runs. Like they would score on like 4 straight possessions. It's like, oh, what happens? Like Ohio State was up 28-0 before we realized what was going on in the game. And like they did that in 2019. Like it was just like score. And like Michigan helped them with some of the penalties and stuff we talked about. But Ohio State was opportunistic and just like pumped in 3 or 4 straight touchdowns. And they like had they weren't that offense like really at any point last year, other than maybe the Western Kentucky game. They definitely were that at times the prior 2 years, but not in the Michigan game. Like that thing that sort of like felt like a trait of Ohio State under Ryan Day just sort of like disappeared in the Michigan game, which then allowed Michigan, I think, to play in a much more comfortable game state for the kind of team that it wants to be. Which
is one of those things like don't try to be Michigan, but try not to let Michigan be Michigan. So,
Yeah.
like, what does that mean in actuality? Does this mean that Ryan Day should come out? I guess Chip Kelly. I don't even want to say trick play, but should they come out and like empty the holster in the first quarter? Like, we're not saving, we're not trying as like, you want to run the damn ball. It's like, okay. But also maybe not, we're not trying to establish something. We're not easing into this. We're not
Yeah.
trying to poke and prod. We're going to attack, and we've got this thing on the third play that we're going to drop a bomb on your head, right? And I don't necessarily mean a 50-yard pass, but like, we're going to do something.
Mhm.
We're going to take the fight to you. And that doesn't mean a quadruple reverse, but it means ultra aggression to try to get a 2-score lead early to force Michigan out of its comfort zone, as opposed to maybe being willing to trade punches early and being afraid of making a killer mistake. Like, could
Yeah.
that be an actual implementation of something like this?
I think so, but I think also that the trick with that is, because I would say that Ohio State did that in this 2019 game. I think it was easier to find the soft spots to attack to do that early with Don Brown than probably it has been the last couple of years. One, because of the more complexity in the defense, and two, because Michigan knew Ohio State's plays. But yeah, I do think I just like to throw that in there to like just for the people every now and then.
We should just have it on the ticker on the bottom on YouTube.
Yeah.
Instead of it being an ad for the tech subscription service, it should just be a reminder Michigan knew their plays.
Yeah, but no, I think that's right. I think like abandon the feeling out process. Be the aggressor. Yeah.
All right. And number 5 for me is don't let Michigan know your plays. No, it's not. But I mean, like, I guess it's the bonus. It's the bonus category that, it's true. And it's the play again, watching the 22 play again. I think is emblematic. The number one play that I think is emblematic, and I've definitely like talked to people about this, is the 4th down call in the 22 game, the pass to Cade Stover that Ohio State thought had a chance to be wide open, and like the defensive end ran with Cade Stover, and they were like, how did that defensive end know that was coming? And then the throw was like a scooch bit off, and Stover couldn't quite make the catch. Whereas maybe you think that's like a to the house, there's nobody there, and flip that, and we might not be having this conversation, right? So that's why we have to acknowledge it, right? We acknowledge it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it should be that. That is the all of this is happening under that umbrella. Yeah. This conversation. Yeah.
So number 5, actually for me, and again, this is incongruous because like Michigan threw it pretty well. The corners playing smart and aggressive. And the thing I guess I mean by this is, I was watching the beginning of the 22 game again, and I was like, how did Ohio State lose this game? And then I got to the play where Jim Knowles blitzed and Cam Brown missed the tackle. And I was like, that's right. That's how they lost this game. I don't think Jeff Okudah or Damon Arnett would have missed that tackle. And then I was looking at something else, and it was like, was it that game also? Like Denzel Burke bit up on a throw and got hit over the top, like on an early drive in 22, right? That was like the guy was open by like 20 yards. And I was like,
I think it was Cam Martinez.
They were just giving, and this is just a reminder. It's not what happened last year, but as much as Okudah and Arnett did give some stuff up, they were also in guys' jerseys at times, and they were making Michigan make difficult throws. And so the thing of this that I think is hopeful for Ohio State is Okudah and Arnett were first-round corners, right? There were 2 first-round corners playing that game. I think Ohio State could have 2 first-round corners in this 2024 game. And I think their secondary right now, which I think is the best secondary in the country, has the ability to play aggressive without getting burnt, and has the ability to get in guys' jerseys and make every throw difficult. And even that Donovan Peoples-Jones drop that I talked about at the end of the first half, he had it, but like Fuller and Okudah were right there.
Yeah.
And they're just, it's maybe more of a 22 conversation than a 23 conversation, but still it's like you can't play off, I don't think, in this game, right? You can't play soft because you're afraid of getting beat. You have to play aggressive, and you have to get up on top of guys, and you have to play press and then make sure you didn't get beat. So it's a hard ask, but it's also the standard. And in 2019, man, right? When Okudah and Arnett had it going on, like they had it going on, man,
Yeah.
didn't they? And
Yeah.
that's what you have to do in this game.
Yeah. And like Ohio State, I just think like after this season didn't have the personnel to do that.
Right.
Okuda and Arnett left, and there was holes in the position group because of poor recruiting, I think, like from Taver Johnson. And they had to catch back up. Now they have. So like I have probably near 100% confidence that the Ohio State's corner is going to be able to do what you're asking of them against Michigan and against everybody else that Ohio State plays this year. I think they are back to that. Like, will one of these guys be the number 3 pick in the draft? Like, I don't, maybe not. I don't know, but I think Denzel Burke, Davis Igbinosun, and even Jermaine Matthews. We don't quite know what his role is going to be, but I think all 3 of those guys are probably first round corners, or at least Jermaine has the ceiling of a first round corner. So the feel and the vibe from that 2019 group and the groups prior to that, I think is like fully back now with these guys. So
Yeah.
I think they'll do what you're asking.
Yeah. So I think in the end, it might really be about this group, this secondary, just getting after it in this game, and then a physical run game component, the run the damn ball part of it, which is like, it's the last thing I ever want to give into. But I think this rewatch made it clear. And I think the addition of Judkins is huge for that. So I think the thing I think that Ohio State needs to accept based off the 2019 game is that Michigan's good.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when it comes to the shortcomings that Ohio State maybe has exhibited and the things they did better in 2019, it feels like they have the ability, not coincidental, like specifically, like they went out, whether it's the secondary has come around, or whether it's the specificity of Chip Kelly and Quinshon Judkins and Will Howard and what they will bring to the offense. It feels like most of the solutions that we're saying they need actually might be sitting right here.
Yeah, I think that's right. What did you think of Ryan Day, like rewatching the game, like his like sort of like demeanor and vibe?
It felt like very emotional, right? Like very like,
but like
very
the right kind of felt like the right kind of emotional to me.
Like, he wasn't. I mean, he was carrying this burden because he was very upfront about it after the game of how
he almost looked like he was going to cry right after the game, talking about it.
If he felt he had to win this game, but he didn't show it during the game. You know what? Shave the beard for the game. Do we need boyish Ryan Day back? Not bearded and burdened Ryan Day. Boyish and hopeful Ryan Day.
Lesson 6: shave the beard. Yeah. Maybe.
Like
baby face assassin. Yeah.
Because this was still, I don't know. I was going to say this was still an opportunity. No, it wasn't. Because if he had lost his first game to Michigan, people would have been like, well, we hired the wrong guy.
They would not have cared that Ohio State was 11-0 and number 1 in the country prior to that. Yeah.
So I certainly wouldn't. I mean, it wouldn't be fair to say that he had less pressure on him in the 2019 game. That's not why, right? That's not true.
I guess like they had already clinched the Big Ten title game. So like in some way, as long as you had won the Big Ten championship, you were probably going to go to the playoff, right? So like the Michigan game didn't carry those sort of implications, but I still think he felt a tremendous amount of pressure.
Yeah.
Based off of his emotional state after the game.
But he just seemed to navigate it better, which is like, okay, you handle the pressure better in the win than you did in the losses. Great analysis, guys. I mean, but you could almost feel it early in the moment as it happened. Yeah.
Yeah. Like early in the game, like as you mentioned at the start of the show, like that was Ohio State didn't score the first 6 times it had the ball, right? Like it was a game for a while, and like Michigan scored first, and there was some wonky stuff happening, but it never felt like Ohio State was playing tight. They just kind of felt like they had it in control the whole time, and Ryan Day like had a great idea of how he wanted to go about his business that day.
I think maybe his face was less scrunched up during the game. Which maybe having Chip Kelly call the plays will allow him to unscrunch his face on the sideline.
Yeah.
They've addressed a lot of this. So I think there are good lessons to take away, but don't, and I'm sure the program won't do it, but don't, as a fan, assume that the departure of Jim Harbaugh means that Michigan's going to go back to its old ways, because I think that would be a very dangerous and incorrect assumption. And there's enough things they do well that I think are embedded in that program right now, and they have confidence and they have no pressure on them for this game, right? If Ohio State's natty or bust, Michigan's Meineke Car Care Bowl or bust. They got a championship in their pocket, man. Their coach bolted for the NFL. Like what? There's no bust, right?
Yeah.
They're wait, and the NCAA might come in and disband the program. Like there's no, like they've done it. This is all gravy for the rest of Michigan's football existence, however long it is, whether it's a year or another 100 years. It's all gravy.
That's right.
Jim Harbaugh beat Ohio State 3 times in a row and went 15-0, won the national title.
Yeah.
All right. So those are our lessons learned from the 2019 Ohio State-Michigan game. We always appreciate you guys making us part of your week. We'll be back with another Kings of Columbus next week. Make sure you're tuning in to Kings of the North. Have some special stuff drop in there for you. And again, as you guys know, Kings of the North will just ramp up more as we get into the season. And Bill and I will be on that show doing our thing there. For now, thanks to our producer, Mike Yorstowski, for making us look good and sound good. He's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of Columbus.